Hello, Telvanni here, and today I thought I'd share with you the latest Atlas strategy I've been cooking up. After running our 100 map test, which was mostly Elk and Go, I sufficiently detoxed from juice, so I decided it was time to run something a little spicier. This got me thinking, with the price of simulacrums down to 60 chaos, are Delirium Mirrors still worth farming? It's been several weeks since I've run any Legion. How's it holding up? In our last video, we determined that Divination Scarabs were not worth the investment on low-juiced Promenade. But what about when we dial up the juice levels? And what about Expedition? Certain logbooks can be quite valuable, but how profitable is it on a map-to-map basis? Going into this, I have my gut feelings about how profitable each of these will be, but hopefully by the end of this video, we will have some definitive answers. So let's go ahead and start breaking down this Atlas strategy. For our map, we wanted one with a valuable divination card and a good layout for our Delirium Mirror. Promenade, Tower, Burial Chambers, and Cemetery all came to mind. I ruled out Tower, as the Delirium Fog can be a little difficult to keep up with in its winding corridors, and the boss is very annoying to kill. I also ruled out Cemetery, as while it is fairly open, I did not deem it linear enough to complement our Delirium Mirror. So we were left with Promenade and Burial Chambers. And boy, let me tell you, I really wanted to run Burial Chambers. The prospect at dropping a nearly 15 Exalted Orb card, raw, was so tempting. However, ultimately the layout is not ideal for Delirium Mirrors, as while the map seems linear, it is broken up into 3 sections. The second section is quite close geographically to where the mirror spawns, and I didn't want to risk losing our Delirium Fog. So for this test, we will be running Promenade. Promenade? Promenade. Promenade? Ultimately, I've decided to use the British English pronunciation as sampled by the Cambridge English Dictionary. However, if you have a 5th, 6th, or 7th pronunciation you think I missed, please let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, Promenade has an incredibly linear layout, and can drop the semi-valuable divination cards, Dying Anguish and the Patient. This makes it an excellent choice for running juiced Delirium Mirrors. Alright, so we've got our 50 Promenade maps here, and I've gone ahead and chiseled, elked, and volved them. And since my Tornado Shot Raider can handle all map mods, we haven't worried about the rolls. On to our Scarabs. First up, we have our Polished Divination Scarabs. This should theoretically double the number of valuable divination cards we drop. And since they don't add any monsters themselves, they won't increase our map duration. After our last baseline test, I am fairly confident we will make profit off of these. But as I am recording this before I have run the maps, we'll have to wait and see just how much we'll make. Next we have Polished Harbinger Scarabs. These should add some decent juice to our maps, without adding too much time spent in each map. For our third Scarab, we will be running Polished Expedition. This is a bit of a newcomer to our tests, but I expect it to add a significant number of monsters to our maps, and also give us the opportunity for some juicy logbook drops. Finally, we will be running Gilded Legion Scarabs. This will force every Legion encounter on the map to have 2 Generals and 2 Warhordes, and this should synergize incredibly well with our Sextants. Speaking of which, let's go over those quickly right now. For our first Sextant, we will be running Areas Contain a Mirror of Delirium, as it is the only reliable way to get a Delirium Mirror in our maps every time. Next, we are taking Unique Monsters Drop Corrupted Items. This applies to all unique monsters, including Legion Generals, Beyond Bosses, Delirium Bosses, and our map bosses. Ideally, we will be getting several 6-linked items every map from running this Sextant. For our third Sextant, we will be running additional Legion. This pairs incredibly well with our Gilded Legion Scarabs, as it guarantees a second Legion encounter in our maps, while at the same time inheriting all of the bonuses from our Scarabs. Finally, we will be running a Blight Sextant. I was torn between running the Beyond Sextant instead, however, Blight is incredibly cheap, costing less than 1 chaos per map to run, and with our Atlas passives, it should spit out a ton of monsters for us. Alright, let's take a look at that Atlas tree now. We are pathing over here, grabbing some essence nodes. grabbing this Alva node to help sustain our mission pool a little bit. Over here, we will be grabbing this Blight node, as it drastically increases the amount of monsters from Blight, while at the same time reducing the amount of time spent dealing with the mechanic. This is actually our only Blight node, as we are only using it as a cheap Delirium juicer. Next, we are pathing over here, grabbing some further Essence nodes. Coming up here to grab these Delirium nodes here and here. We are taking these Influence pack size nodes, as they should increase our Eater of World pack size as well. And as we are juicing Delirium, we are grabbing the Beyond nodes here and here. Backtracking over here, we are grabbing more Essence nodes, here and here. Taking the Expedition nodes here, and the Harbinger nodes here. Coming down here, we are grabbing further Harbinger nodes here and here, and taking these Expedition nodes as well. Coming up here, we are grabbing Eater of World nodes here and here, and taking the Legion nodes here, here, and here. We are not grabbing this Legion node, as we are already getting this effect from running Gilded Legion Scarabs. Next, let's take a quick look at our expenses, as this is by far our biggest investment yet. We bought our maps for around 3.5 chaos each, totaling up to be 175 chaos. We used 20 chaos worth of chisels, 5 chaos worth of alchemy orbs, and our vol orbs cost us 45 chaos. We paid about 7.5 chaos per Divination and Expedition Scarab, just shy of 8 chaos per Harbinger Scarab, and Gilded Legion Scarabs were 6 chaos each. We spent a whopping 1,240 chaos on 50 charges of Delirium Mirrors. Our Corrupted Sextants were another 625 chaos. Legion Sextants were around 4 chaos per charge, totaling up to just shy of 200 chaos for 50 charges. And finally, our Blight Sextants were actually incredibly cheap, at less than 1 chaos per charge, totaling up to be 40 chaos for this test. We will also be running Curix Beyond Craft on every map for an additional 250 chaos total. One more thing I should note is that we will be running Alva missions on every map, as I do have over 50 stored in my map device from all of our previous tests. However, if you are trying to replicate this test at home, you may need to farm some beforehand. Alright, so all of our expenses for this project totals up to be a hefty 4,025 chaos, or around 26 exalts at the current exchange rate. However, even with all of these expenses, I am fairly certain we will make up all of our initial investment, although we will have to wait and see just how much profit we will make. So with all of that out of the way, I will go ahead and start running these maps, and I'll see you on the flip side. Alright, we are back. I've just finished running all 50 of these Delirium Mirror maps, and I thought I should share a little bit more information with you guys about how we were running these maps. First off, let me say, my goodness, did these take a long time to run. While focused, I was getting a maximum of 4 map completions per hour. Next, I'm usually a big proponent of vendoring 6-socketed items. However, a few maps into this test, I actually had to take them off of my filter, as I was running out of portals to bank all of the loot we were receiving in this mega juice test. Finally, as usual, I was not interacting much with the Arch Nemesis mechanic, so if you are attempting this strategy, you could expect even further profits. So with that information out of the way, let's take a bit of a sneak peek at how our test went. Going into this test, we had an incredible amount of investment to make up, as our initial investment was nearly 26 Exalted Orbs. However, as you can see here, our total revenue received was a pretty insane 91x, which is just shy of a 4 times return on our initial investment. Next, let's take a look at just exactly what we are calculating here. This was one of our largest tests yet, and as usual, we have excluded a significant portion of the loot from our calculations. I have only included loot which you can instantly sell to other players for cold hard currency. Here we have our Scarabs tab. The majority of this came from the Eater of World altars. Next we have our Essence tab. As usual, I have gone ahead and converted all of our lower essences up, and I have excluded anything below Screaming from our calculations. And here we have the first big league mechanic we were testing out, Delirium. In this 50 map test, we had 33 full simulacrums drop. This averaged out to be around 200 simulacrum splinters per map. We also had over 50 Delirium orbs drop during this test, averaging out to be over 1 orb per map. Moving on, we have our Harbinger tab. We'll talk more about this in a little while, but I was actually surprised by how little currency we got from Harbingers. Here we have our Legion tab. We had 4 full 5-way sets drop during this test. As usual, I haven't included any unhatched incubators as profit in this test, as they are difficult to sell. However, I was throwing incubators on my character as they dropped, and anything that hatched from those during the test has been included in the general loot, as you should always be using your incubators when running a Legion strategy. Next, we have our Expedition tab. We received quite a few reroll tokens, and while I believe we could easily profit much more from Expedition by using these currencies, for the sake of this test, I've just included the raw price you can expect to get if you were to sell your reroll currency. We also had 14 logbooks drop. Unfortunately, 4 of these were corrupted and have been excluded from our calculations. This was either due to the corruption sextants or my inability to read remnants, as I was in a hurry to set these off as our delirium fog was ticking down. Of our remaining 10 logbooks, we had 1 Knight of the Sun, 7 Black Scythe, 1 Order of the Chalice, and 1 Broken Circle. Finally, we have our General Loot tab. This is everything else we are calculating. As usual, I've converted all of our smaller currencies up via the vendor. That would be our transmutations and augmentations up into alteration orbs, our jewelers into fusings, and our chance orbs into scourings. For our maps, I have only included our non-corrupted favorited map. All of our other maps have been excluded from our profits. During this test, we had a whopping 38 patience and 54 dying anguish cards drop. This is equivalent to nearly 5 nurse cards. Speaking of which, we also had 1 nurse card drop from a Divination Legion monster. I've decided to include this in our total profits, but I have excluded this drop from our Divination Scarab profitability calculations. We also had 4 raw exalted orbs drop, one of which was actually duplicated via our Eater of World altar. Finally, we had nearly 200 divine orbs drop, averaging out to be just shy of 4 divine orbs per map. I would say roughly 95% of these dropped exclusively from 6 links added via our corruption sextant. However, before we go tooting the efficacy of a corruption sextant, I would also like to point out that most of our boss maps came from unique monsters at the end of the map. This means they dropped corrupted and have thus lowered in value. Moving on to our excluded loot tab here, we had over 50 of our favorited maps drop corrupted. This also eats into our profits, as no one wants to buy corrupted white maps and low quality rare ones. Factoring all of that in, I would say that we probably made anywhere from 8 to 9 chaos profit from running corrupted sextants, rather than the 20 chaos it might look like on paper. Continuing on, you can see that we have a lot of other stuff we are excluding from our calculations. A bunch of junk unique maps and contracts, semi-valuable cluster jewels that you could potentially sell for 5 to 20 chaos each. Ultimately, I decided against including these as they are slow sells. We had so much excluded loot, I actually needed a second tab to store it all in, as we are not calculating any of these junk divination cards, lower tier currencies, random fossils, and incubators. Alright, so now that we know exactly what we are including and excluding from our calculations, let's take a deeper look into how much value specific league mechanics added to our maps. First up, we had Delirium, which turned out to be the powerhouse of this test. We spent nearly 1,300 chaos on sextants to run these maps, but we ended up profiting over 1,500 chaos. This brings our profit per map from Delirium up to over 30 chaos. I should also mention that I actually failed 2 Delirium Mirrors while running this test. Because we were adding so many mechanics to our map that pause the Delirium fog, if you have a strong build, it is very easy to find yourself ahead of the fog. I wasn't paying close enough attention on a couple of the maps, and I actually accidentally outran the fog and lost the Delirium. So as long as you were paying attention, you could probably expect to profit a little bit higher from your maps. Ultimately, if you're adding a lot of juice to your maps and can get over 200 splinters pretty consistently, I would say that Delirium is definitely worth it. Next up, we had Harbinger. I was actually a little surprised at how little profit we made from Harbinger. We invested nearly 400 chaos in Scarabs and made less than 350 chaos in profit. This averaged out to be around 7 chaos per map. While this might be a little low, I think Harbinger is probably still worth running, as it adds a lot of monsters to your map, but doesn't take very much time to run like some of our other league mechanics. and you never know. You could always get lucky and drop a mirror shard from it. The next mechanic we were looking at was Legion. Once again, Legion proved to be very profitable, even as the league goes on. We invested short of 500 chaos into running Legion between our Sextants and our Scarabs, and we profited over 1100 chaos, equaling out to be 23 chaos per map. Legion is definitely still worth running today. Here we have the newcomer, Expedition. We spent 375 chaos on Expedition Sextants, and profited nearly double that at 702 chaos. This totaled up to be 14 chaos per map. I would say Expedition is certainly worth running, even if you're not interacting with the vendors. Although, if you are willing to use your Expedition currencies, I believe it could be even more profitable than this. Finally, we had our Divination Scarabs. After our last baseline test on Go Promenade, I was certain we would end up making some profits on this. The question going in, however, was how much? We had 1200 chaos and drops from our Patient and Dying Anguish cards. We can assume that about half of this came from running polished Divination Scarabs. This means that we profited 258 chaos during this test from running polished Divination Scarabs, or around 5 chaos per map. Ultimately, I was a little disappointed with the returns on this one. Even with a lot of juice on our maps, we still didn't see great returns running Divination Scarabs on Promenade. So I would have to say that Divination Scarabs are currently not worth running, unless you are both juicing your map and using Magic Find. Finally, I actually have a lot of useful thoughts on this strategy. First off, I would either drop the Divination Scarabs or run Magic Find. However, I'm not sure Magic Find is really realistic for most people, as running 200 plus Delirium maps can be quite difficult. So I might try to mess around with my Atlas to drop the Essence nodes and grab Breach nodes, and then we could use the 4th Scarab slot on a Breach Scarab. I'm also not sold on the Corrupted Sextants. They certainly add some value to the maps, but they also cost us some profits we would have made from maps that wouldn't have otherwise been corrupted. Ultimately, I'm not sure what I would replace it with, however, as it was netting us several chaos per map. Finally, I'm not sure I would recommend everyone to run Delirium with Expedition. It worked very well for me, as my build is quite strong. However, there were times when Expedition spawned at the very end of the map, and let me tell you, it was a bit of a slog with the damage reduction from Delirium and all of the modifiers from Expedition. So to sum things up, Delirium is definitely worth running if you're juicing your maps and have a strong enough build to get a lot of splinters every time. Harbinger doesn't add a huge amount of value to your maps, but for the amount of effort and the possibility of huge rewards, I'd say it's worth running. Legion is still very much worth running today, and Expedition is a huge moneymaker, especially if you're willing to interact with the vendors, although I might not run it with Delirium unless your build is very strong. Divination Scarabs, not worth running unless you are both juicing and using Magic Find. From this test, we profited a whopping 65 Exalted Orbs, totaling up to be 202 chaos per map. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up, as these map science videos take a long time to make. And if you'd like to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing, as it means a lot to the channel. Anyway, thank you for watching, good luck with your league, and I'll see you in the next one.